Breaking news! Mark Fastoso has painted the Bismarck! Dun dun dun! Put him in jail, people! Put him in jail! Put him in jail! I'm just kidding. Don't put him in jail, because he's me.
Hey, that was Charlie. I'm Mark, and welcome to Mark's Game Room. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a follow-up to my Battle of Denmark Straits for $35 video. In that, I suggested if you wanted to do naval miniatures on the cheap, if you're a new gamer you want to get into it, it's a great way to get in, is to use Panzerschiffe miniatures, which are resin miniatures, which are very blocky. They're really just kind of the outline of the ships. And I find that painting those is a lot of fun. Like I bought them to do the video because they were cheap. And I hadn't really gamed with them in, I don't know, 20 years or 25 years. But when I started painting them, I found I really enjoyed it. And the reason was, it felt like it felt like coloring books for historical miniatures. Meaning there's not a lot of detail, it's just an outline, and you kind of fill it in. And it was easy to paint, it was fun to paint. It actually allowed me to use my imagination more because the detail wasn't presented. I had to figure out how I wanted it to look. So it became a lot of fun. So I thought I would give you my tips on how I paint Panzerschiffe miniatures. Now when we talk about the Bismarck, how are we going to paint it? Because everyone knows this Bismarck. Right, it's got these cool jagged black and white lines. It has the Third Reich flag on it. But that paint scheme only existed before it sailed for its ill-fated voyage into the North Atlantic. That scheme was used in the Baltic Sea when it was basically doing maneuvers in there. I think it was painted like that so it wouldn't be mistaken for an enemy ship by the Luftwaffe. So when it sailed out for its ill-fated voyage, they painted it basically gray, including over the air identification flags. So you can see here in this still that I took from the historical footage that was filmed from the Prince Eugen. You can see in the front of the Prince Eugen there, they've just painted where the flag was gray. So we're going to paint the Bismarck in the historical battle colors, so to speak, what it looked like when it went out into the North Atlantic, which was mainly a gray with its flag covered over. So what you're going to need are paints, and the colors I'll go along as we do it. You're going to need a piece of wood or plastic to make a base. You'll need your paintbrushes. You'll need toilet paper. You'll need PVA glue or Elmer's glue. What else? And you're going to need plastic bonder glue. And that's important because the Panzerschiffes are like a plastic resin, and to have it adhere well to the wood, you need this plastic bonder, which you can get at Home Depot. So, if you're all set, let's get started. First, you should wash the model in warm soapy water to get anything off the model that might keep the paint from sticking. Once you've washed it, set it to let it dry.
Hey Daddy, maybe I can dry it off.
Look back at me, First thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the Bismarck to a base, kind of like you see here. And it's important to have it on a base if you want to have these cool looking waves and also the name tag. So you'll need wood or plastic can work. Anything that's okay if it gets wet. If you use cardboard, it probably won't work because when you make the waves, the cardboard will just get too wet. And then you're going to need to mix up your plastic bonder. And this is important because this type of adhesive will make this resin stick well to the wood. This is probably the best stuff going. I think I got it at Home Depot. There's probably others like it, but you need plastic bonder. And all you're going to do is mix it up. It comes in a 2-part solution, so you just pour out some. It's probably a little bit of too much on the one side, so I'm just gonna take off a little bit there. You want to mix it Yeah, about 50-50, so I'm not using all of that light color. Mix it up well. That should be good. And then all you need to do is apply it to the bottom of the Bismarck, and you'll stick it to the wood. So once you've mixed your plastic bonder 50-50, just take some and you just spread it out on the bottom. And you just need a thin layer will do. You don't have to go overboard, so to speak. And when you're done, just lay it down, center it. And I offset it a little bit to the starboard side to give room for the name tag. Okay. And when that dries, that'll hold all the pieces of wood together and we'll be ready for our next step. So just need to let it dry.
Hey, Daddy, can I dry it?
Okay, now the Bismarck has dried to its base, so it's pretty secure. Everything's good to go. It's one piece, like our model here. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to put on the wave, the texture for the waves, as you see here. And it's very simple. You're going to need some toilet paper and some PVA, Elmer's glue, and water. So I've taken toilet paper like this, just whatever you have, and I've roughly torn it into a shape that'll fit on the base all around the model, like so. So it doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of fits roughly around the model. Then you're going to take some PVA glue and you're going to mix it with water. So I'm not a scientist, I'm definitely more storyteller artist, so I don't really have exact measurements to tell you, but all I know is it always works. So you take some PVA and you just put not too much water, you know, that's probably even maybe too much. And then you just mix it up. So, you know, I don't know, I would say you probably want to make it 2 parts glue to 1 part water. This looks like it's maybe 1 to 1. It's not awful, so I'll probably just add a little more glue in there. There you go. You want it so that it's very runny, but you want to make sure there's some glue in there so that the toilet paper solidifies. That looks pretty good. So it's not, you can't see through it, but it's very runny. And then all you do is you go to the model and you just start putting the glue water solution all over the toilet paper and really, really soak the toilet paper. So there you go. Whoops. And the next thing I do is I'll take an X-Acto knife with a blade I don't care about, and then I'll go around and just kind of push the paper off the hull a bit so it's a little cleaner. And you can maybe leave some if you want it to look like waves coming up. Also make sure you're covering everything like that. And then once that is done, I'll kind of spread it out to look more like waves. So here in the back we want to get some there. And then I'll just kind of go and try to give it a little bit of wave look. I'm usually not too fussy because from a distance it just looks like waves, and when you paint it, you'll paint it in a way that will help bring out a pattern that the water's moving this way, and that will help. Okay, so there you go. Maybe we could use a little more down this end for a bow wake. There you go. Okay, and there you have our waves. And then once again, we need to let it dry, and then we're going to prime it. So you want this really to dry fully, or else when you wet the toilet paper, it might reactivate. You don't want that. Okay, let it dry one more time. just give it one good coat with any good white primer. Just make sure it's white, because you'll need that to get good vibrant colors. Okay, the Bismarck's been primed white. It's all ready to go, and now we're going to put the initial color on the model itself. So I use these folk art paints from Michael's or any craft store, and I mean they're not high-end hobby paints like you might use for modeling like Vallejo, but I've always enjoyed them. They do a good job, and they're not very expensive. So if you're sticking with the theme of Battle of Denmark Straits for $35, these are kind of good paints, especially if you're starting out. So we just need a little bit there, and we're gonna water it down. Some quality H2O, and then all you want to do is cover the entire model with this light gray. Oh, so this is Dove Gray by Folk Arts, and you can see it's a light gray. It just darkens it up, you know, shade or two, and there you go. Just cover the whole model. Might give it 2 coats if you need to. And it's important to cover the whole thing because the next step we're going to put a wash over this, which is going to bring out all of these very clean lines that exist on Panzerschiffe. So there you have it, a nice good coat all around. Things covered, and there you go. Once again, just let it dry. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add a wash to the whole model. And what the wash is going to do is it's going to settle in all the seams, and that's really going to make it pop so that you can really see the articulation of the model. And if it's like a coloring book, right, those are kind of the black lines that you color in. So I'm using Null Oil by Citadel. It's one of their shades. I do suggest you use an ink as opposed to just a wash because the inks tend to settle more in the cracks, which is what you want. And don't be sparing with this. Really just put a lot over the whole model, but make sure you spread it out. So you can already see how we're starting to pick up all of the lines on this Panzerschiffe model. And this is really key because Panzerschiffes don't have a lot of really fine detail, but what they do, the ink here will really bring out. So you can see now, there you go, you can see all the guns are out, and all the anti-aircraft guns, the secondary guns, all coming out. And I would take a little bit, here I'm going to take a little bit off the top of the turret though. I just don't like that look, that's all. But other than that, I think we're good. That's the simple phase, but the key is get a lot on there so you get a lot of this modeling. And then once again, you just need to sit and let it dry. Okay, to start dry brushing, you're going to need a light colored paint, probably the same color gray that we used on the base, so that's the pale gray. So I'm going to get a little bit of this pale gray out here, a little more. And to dry brush, the idea is you put a light color over top of this dark on the highlight areas, the raised areas, and that will make it pop, right? So you don't want to hit the recesses where we put all that nice black ink. And as the name implies, if you're new to it, dry brushing, you don't want to put any water on your brush. You want it to be dry. So I'm just I like a flat brush for when I dry brush Panzerschiffes, because you're really just you want to pick up the edges, and I just find the flat brush works best. I mean, some people like to use more of a rounded brush for dry brushing, but I'm going to go with the flat brush. So you just put some paint on your brush, And then wipe it off on cardboard is really kind of good. So you take it on, you put it on, and you take it off. And then what you do, you take your model and you want to drag your brush across the highlight areas. So you can see already it starts to pop all these, the gun barrels, get in there, right? And the secondary guns, a little bit on the deck. You can already see it starts to pop out from the deck, which is great. So that's pretty good. Then what I'll do is take a little bit of white, and put a dot of white there. And then make another mixture, kind of like 50-50, so a little splotchier gray, equal splotch of white. It just drops it down a shade. And then again, wipe it off on cardboard. And then just hit it again, a little lighter. And you're just trying to hit the highlights to make them pop. Yeah, it looks pretty good. There. We still have our black areas right in here, you see? Those nice black recesses. And then with the light, you have dark and you have light, and that makes contrast, and that makes it visually appealing to your eye. Great, so that's it. You're done with the dry brushing. There we go, spin it around. You can see how it looks to our finished model. And what we want to do next is put in the deck. So I'm going to clean my brush. You want to use a similar idea. Okay, you want a darker color, and then on top of it, you're going to use a lighter color to allude to the decking. So I'm going to go as the dark color. I'm using this Butter Pecan by Folk Arts. You can see it's kind of like a khaki brown. And so what I'm going to do is take some of that out here. Just a little bit. You don't need that much. That's plenty. And a little bit of the oil in there. Now the key here, you're going to want to do a few layers of this. And you're going to want to start really thin, because you don't want to get too thick and cover over all the black, because you see here you still have some of that black outlining, and you don't want to lose that. So I find if you start with a really thin coat, it doesn't look like much in the beginning, but it doesn't matter. You just put on a thin coat, try not to hit the black lines, all right? And just cover over where the deck is all the way around the Bismarck. And then later we're going to go in, we're going to put in those air identification panels that the Bismarck painted over before it set sail on its ill-fated voyage to the North Atlantic. You can see we're just putting a thin coat, and that's it. You're going to want to let that dry. So just going around, there you go. You see the black lines are still there. So first coat of that, and you're gonna let it dry. And after it's gonna dry, I'm gonna put on a few more coats. And after that, we'll move on to the next phase. So let this dry. Well, I've taken the time to put a few more coats of the light tan on the deck. Again, doing them in very thin layers so we don't lose the black lines that are all around. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add an illusion, so to speak, right? We're going to put in some lines that allude to a wooden deck. And we're not going to do the exact lines. It's more of an impression, so this might be, kind of, Claude Monet's impressionist version of a deck, right? So you can see on our finished model, I just have these lines. And when you look at it from, 3 feet, which is what you'd be on a table, it kind of looks like a deck. So the key there is you want a lighter color over top. So we used originally Butter Pecan by Folk Arts, which is this kind of khaki, dark khaki, I guess. And we're going to use this, which is called Linen from Folk Arts, and you can see it's a very, very light version of this, probably 2 shades lighter than the deck. And again, you want light on top of dark to create contrast. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this there on my palette, probably a little too much. And I have this 3/0 brush, so it's a very thin brush. And this, requires a bit of a steady hand, I guess, but don't worry. Again, you're looking at it from 3 feet, and it's just kind of an impression of a deck. You want your paint to be a little thin. And this is really, I think this is what got me into really liking painting Panzerschiffe, because I realized, as you would be doing in a coloring book, right, filling in the lines. How do you fill in the lines in a coloring book? A solid color, hash marks, shadings, all kinds of things you can do. And you can really kind of invent what you're doing. And I just kind of invented this idea of a deck. So I got a thin brush with fairly watered down paint. And then you just go in and you drag it, put some lines. And then, leave a fair amount of space. Try it again. You might have to get a feel for it. And this one here, at the end, kind of petered out. And don't worry if you don't get it straight, because you can always go back with the darker color and touch up. So we're just putting in these lines. See, my hand gets a little easier as we do it. If you want to do it in shorter strokes, that's probably also helpful as well. You just go in and you put them on the deck. It's not terrible. And you just go by eye, what feels good. Maybe a little more over here. That's not bad. And then on the side, there's a little piece. Just put a little highlight in there. Again, if it's a little too much, don't worry. You can always go back with the darker color later. And we'll put this up here. In some ways, this step, I think, is where you're giving the ship its personality or the look, right? It's where it can be different. Gotta be careful of the black lines. You don't want to go over them. Let me see. Okay, and up here up front. You are going to be going to put in the aircraft recognition panel up front, so you'll cover over some of this anyways. There we go. I always find the long areas are the hardest, so I just do my best. That one's a little smudged, but I can, again, go touch it up. So let me just try to get this a little straighter. You can also try, I don't know, using a toothpick to get straight lines. I'm not so concerned. I think these look fine. There you go. So there's kind of a deck. Then I usually just go around and maybe touch up a few areas. Maybe this could use a little more. Now, certainly, this is where you need a steady hand, but I'll just show you down here. So this area right here, I feel like, it's a little too blobby. So all you need to do, you let it dry, and luckily these Folk Arts paint quick, and we go back to our darker color. Going to take a little bit here out of the lid, and a tiny bit of water. Okay, and then so in this area I just want to go back in. There you go, and just straighten it out a little bit. There you go, just straighten it out. Maybe this too, right in here, straighten that out. Now this area here, maybe. Good. And there's our deck. clean our brush. Next step is we're going to put on the aircraft recognition panels. That's here and here. So if you remember from the Baltic camouflage, these were the kind of Nazi flags so that German planes would see it's a German ship and not bomb it. But when they went out to sea for Denmark Straits, they painted those over with a darker gray. So let me go get that now. So the color I use for that is, funny enough, French gray. So we're going to use French gray from Folk Arts for those colors. And again, we want dark because we'll put a little bit of highlight on it just to give some visual interest. So I'm going to use a little wider brush. And again, I'm going to water down this a bit. And what we want to do is just up in the front where it was, we just drag the brush across to make a kind of a rectangle area here. There you go. Again, you go into the back part, drag the brush straight across. There you have your aircraft recognition panels. And what I do is I don't like to keep any big surface just a solid color. I like to break it up a little bit just to give some visual interest. So on our finished model, you can see I just put some hash marks for the lighter color. So I'm going to go back to my Dove Gray, and put a little dot here. That's probably a little too light. So I'm going to mix it 50-50 with the French gray, make a nice blob, and just kind of cut it in half, which is nice. And then I'm going to go to the model, and I just put some kind of hash marks in there just to lighten it up a bit. And then I'll go back to my mix and add another dollop of the lighter color, give it another layer, and just give it a couple more little dots. Don't have to be too picky. It's just too, not too much. It's just to give it, you know, nothing is there. Okay, so there we have the Bismarck with the deck and the aircraft recognition panels that have been essentially grayed out. Next thing we want to do is add the black around the smokestack. So I'll take a little black, and again I just have Folk Arts black, and just want to cover the top of the smokestack and maybe a little bit around the edges. And that really makes a difference, actually, that black there. Okay, one last thing on painting the actual model itself is the secondary guns. They're really small, and what I found is it's really helpful to take a little bit of your light gray and maybe a dot of white. Mix those 50-50. Okay, and just give a little highlight to the gun barrels. And it's just going to let them, you know, people will see that they're gun barrels. It gives a little bit more interest and highlights them a little bit. So there you go, and then you can put a little maybe highlights on these anti-aircraft batteries, just so they pop out a little bit more. There, little bits here and there. Great. Okay, so there we have the Bismarck, looking very noble and majestic. And then we want to paint the whole base blue. And I use Windsor blue from Folk Arts. It's a nice deep blue, but still, to me, has a lot of color in it, right? It's not a navy blue, it's still quite bright. And so I water it down quite a bit for the first coat. And just cover the whole thing blue. Okay, there you go. So now you can see we are really close. We got our Bismarcks. You just need to let this blue dry. And when this blue is dry, you might give it a second coat. Then we'll put on the waves and the tag. So to make the waves, we're just going to use white. And what I like to use is a kind of a real wide brush like this. And it's kind of like, maybe call it a heavy dry brush, so no water. Put some water on the paint on the brush, and then, you know, kind of wipe some off, but not totally. And then you want to take the Bismarck and you want to start at the front of the ship, and you want to pull your brush along all the way to the back. And that's kind of it. And then I'll do the same over here. And that's it. And what I find is you don't want to overdo it. That's probably plenty right there. Might even be too much. So that's it. Just clean the brush. All right, we're closing in. And then you want to take a thicker brush, or a thinner brush, I would say. And we're going to put some white on it. And then to make the bow wave, you just start at the bottom and you just kind of come out from the bow. Go along the base of the ship and just come out like it's breaking the water. That's all you need to do. And if it's a little more in there, since maybe this waves here is probably a little thicker than my other one, you might want to make this bow wave more vibrant. And then the stern wake, the same thing. You just start on the stern and you just pull the paint away from the ship. There, that's good. And there you have the Bismarck with waves. And the next thing to do actually is to seal the Bismarck. So you want to use a sealer, acrylic sealer, to seal it up, and I'm going to do that and be right back. Okay, the Bismarck's been sealed, and now we're going to put the tag. So I just made this tag on my home computer. It's very simple, and you're just going to glue it down on there. So we just take some good old PVA. In the States, tends to be Elmer's glue. I'm sure there are other companies that make this, but this is definitely the biggest one in the States. And then you're just going to put a little, that's plenty, and then you brush with a little water, and you just move it around, thin it down a little bit. There you go. And you take your tag and you just glue it down. So I like to center the name. So I center the name, and I made the tag bigger than the base so that I can go over the sides. And that's it. And just bend it around the sides. Make sure it's nice and glued down. And then just take a pair of scissors. I just cut the extra off. And there you have it, the Bismarck. It looks great. Yeah, you can see this one definitely a little thicker on the paint. I probably could have dry brushed it a little more, but still looks good. And there you have it. So, I'm going to be giving this Bismarck away for free. To win the free painted Bismarck, all you need to do is join the Fire at Sea Facebook group, and when you see the post for Win the Free Bismarck, just leave a comment saying hi.
You hear that, people? He's giving it away for free. Join the group!
And on August 31st of 2021, I will grab a dice and I will randomly determine which person wins the free Bismarck. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy Fire at Sea. I plan to do other videos coming up, more Ruthless, more Fire at Sea, some Fireball Forward, all kinds of great stuff. And I'll see you next time from Mark's Game Room.